What's up, guys? Welcome back to The Catch. I'm your host, Lawrence, aka Law, and in this video I'm going to be breaking down what I call step backs, and no, I don't mean that garbage that you try to pull on the basketball court. Alright guys, so again, thank y'all so much for coming by and showing support to the channel. I really appreciate it. Hope you guys are getting ready for a good weekend. I'm filming this on Wednesday. I just finished watching Vanderbilt seal the deal in the College World Series, so congratulations to them. But let's get back to the video again, guys. It's going to be something that I call step backs, and what this is just breaking down players who had a very successful year last season, put up really great fantasy numbers for some people, probably won some people some money, won them some leagues, things of that sort. But again, this is just people that I think are going to be taking a little bit of a step back, not necessarily a huge step back. For example, if they finish in the top 10, I'm not saying that they're going to fall all the way back to being somewhere in the high teens, low 20s, nothing like that, but just some people who I think will regress a little bit. Maybe this will help you guys not be so aggressive for these people, because some of these guys are going pretty early in the draft, so you really want to be focusing in the earlier part of the drafts of just adding value. You don't really want too many question marks surrounding your players. So this is just kind of something that I wanted to break down to some people, because I feel like a lot of people are going to be really aggressive on them because the consensus has them going super early, and they're telling you go out and get them. They're going to have another successful year, and sometimes that's not necessarily the case. So the guy that I want to really start off with is a guy who had a phenomenal season last year, finished first among QBs. And if you know, you know, I'm talking about Patrick Mahomes. This is a guy who finished with 580 passing attempts, which is 7th in the league, 383 completions, which was 5th in the league, 5,097 yards passing, which was, of course, 2nd in the league, and then a whopping 50 passing touchdowns, which was 1st in the league by a pretty good margin. So he was actually 5 touchdowns short of breaking Peyton Manning's passing touchdown record of 55 that Peyton Manning set in 2013. But overall, Patrick Mahomes had a phenomenal season. He put up a total of 417 fantasy football points for, of course, the guys that had him. And he was averaging about 26 points a game. But it's just a situation in Kansas City that has a little bit of question marks kind of surrounding it. Of course, with the whole Tyreek Hill incident, is he going to be suspended? Is he not? Are they going to cut him? Are they not? And Tyreek Hill was a pretty good chunk of the performance that Patrick Mahomes put up last season. He actually had 1,500 yards of Patrick Mahomes' 5,000 yards. So a pretty good chunk. It doesn't seem like that much, but you take that away, and it's a totally different ball game. And of course, Tyreek Hill put up 12 touchdowns also. So that's nothing to just kind of sweep under the rug. Tyreek Hill had a phenomenal season last year. He was a huge weapon for the Kansas City Chiefs, and a guy that Patrick Mahomes really relied on. They had a really good connection together. They had some good chemistry going, things of that sort. So with the whole Tyreek Hill scenario and situation that's going on in Kansas City, it really leaves a few question marks surrounding the performance of Patrick Mahomes in this coming season. Now, don't get me wrong, is Patrick Mahomes going to have a solid year? Absolutely. Andy Reid is a proven coach in this league, and he really knows how to get players ready. It doesn't necessarily have to be surrounded by weapons in order for that to happen. So is Patrick Mahomes going to have a great season? Yes. But Patrick Mahomes is a guy who's going as the first quarterback overall. In some leagues, you're seeing him go in the 3rd, maybe the 4th round. If you're in a league full of people that know what they're doing, you're probably going to start to see him go maybe 5th, 6th, maybe the 7th round, depending on how aggressive people are starting to get with their quarterback. So it's just a situation where you got to know he's going to be taking a little bit of a step back. Again, the question marks surrounding the whole Tyreek Hill case, and the depth chart at the wide receiver position right now for the Kansas City Chiefs is Sammy Watkins being their number 1 wide receiver there. Sammy Watkins is a decent wide receiver, hasn't really shown to be able to stay healthy. And it's been a little while since we've seen Sammy Watkins have a really successful year. They went out and drafted Mecole Hardman, or Mecole Hardman, however you want to pronounce that, a rookie this year, who shows flashes that shows signs that he can be a really good wide receiver in this league. And then bringing up the third spot on the depth chart is Demarcus Robinson. So he was a guy who came in last year, had a few decent games for him. He definitely received his share of targets from Patrick Mahomes. So Sammy Watkins, Demarcus Robinson, he's absolutely familiar with, and that's kind of what this offseason kind of brings us, is getting more chemistry with Sammy Watkins, more chemistry with Mecole Hardman, Demarcus Robinson. But nonetheless, Travis Kelce's also going to be there. But if we're being completely honest, Travis Kelce, really the whole offense in general has a little bit of an uphill battle. I'm not saying this to be the case for most defenses in the NFL, but I would side with it being a situation where you always want to take away the first target, and the first target's going to be Travis Kelce. So it's going to really be up to these other guys, Sammy Watkins, Mecole Hardman, to be able to put up numbers for Patrick Mahomes moving forward. So again, a little bit of an uphill battle there, a few question marks kind of surrounding the whole situation there in Kansas City. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how all of that plays out, especially with the whole Tyreek thing going on. So again, it's just a situation that's going to be interesting to see unfold. But nonetheless, I really think that the season that we saw last year from Patrick Mahomes was a phenomenal season. Will we see that again? Possibly. Just a few question marks kind of leading that. I would lean a little bit more towards he's going to be coming down a little more down to earth. Probably finish somewhere, I would say at least in the top 5 quarterbacks. So that's kind of a lot to bite off and a lot to chew on, especially if you're going for a guy in the early parts of the draft. So of course, you could be waiting and picking up other quarterbacks. So just be aware of that moving forward. Patrick Mahomes does see the possibility of being able to possibly taking that step back this coming season. So another guy on the list that I wanted to talk about also was Ben Roethlisberger. So another quarterback, finished third last year, had 675 passing attempts, which was first among quarterbacks last season. He actually had a lot of firsts. He was first in completions with 452, first in passing yards with 5,129 passing yards, and fifth with 34 passing touchdowns. So he was third best in the league last season, and it's just a situation right now where, there's a lot of question marks again surrounding this offense. Antonio Brown is now out of the picture. Again, it's just a situation where we're left with wide receivers on the depth chart that really have been a little bit unproven other than Juju Smith-Schuster. James Washington was a rookie last season who they really hope could take that position, show that he can be a problem in this offense. And, he really just didn't show that much skill, and I've got a lot of love for James Washington. If you watch my first video, I mentioned James Washington. He actually grew up not very far from where I went to school at, so I've got a lot of love for James Washington. Came from a small town similar to me, but it's just a situation where there's just a little bit of question marks. I wish him nothing but the best, but there's just question marks surrounding the situation there. So they went ahead and pulled Dante Moncrief over from the Jacksonville Jaguars, who Dante seems like a guy who's been around forever. I feel like I've heard that name for several years. Similar to Alshon Jeffrey. I thought Alshon Jeffrey was a little bit older. Alshon's only 27. Dante Moncrief is actually only 25, so he definitely still has some tread left on the tires. But it's just a situation for Ben Roethlisberger that we really don't know how this offense is going to be ran in Pittsburgh. Is he going to see another season with 675 passing attempts? Can he match the completions that he got last year with Juju being the number 1 wide receiver there? He also was averaging 21 fantasy points last season, and he finished only behind Patrick Mahomes and Matt Ryan. So it's just, again, a situation where these question marks, they hang over the heads of these teams, and it's just something that I want to make guys cautious about, because if you look at the stats from last year, you think, oh, Ben Roethlisberger, holy cow, I can really get him. He's going later in the drafts. And as of right now, where he's going in the drafts, he's bringing a little bit of value, but you can also pick up other quarterbacks in that spot. And these are all things I'll go over in other videos. But what I don't want anybody falling in the hole with, or falling for the tricks that checking what they did last season, because that doesn't always correlate into the following season. So you have things start to come about with, of course, like Antonio Brown being traded. Juju Smith-Schuster is now the #1 wide receiver there. Can he handle that role? Things of that sort. Can James Washington come in and show that he can be that wide receiver that they're needing? And can Dante Moncrief prove to have that tread on the tires to still be able to provide for the football team? So, again, guys, it just boils down to the questions that are surrounding this team. So it shows me a little bit that Ben Roethlisberger can absolutely be taken a few steps back. So I'm actually staying away from Ben this year because of those question marks. So again, it's just too many factors in the way, too many things that we don't know that are going to be getting in the way of my confidence for Ben Roethlisberger. But again, he's going in the later parts of the draft. So if you find yourself in a situation where you went with a quarterback aggressively in the earlier parts of the draft, you can find Ben Roethlisberger in the double digits, somewhere between the 10th and 12th round. So if you like him, go and get him. He's got a lot of upside, but at the same time, be cautious of this type of situation, because again, so many question marks kind of looming over the head of that Pittsburgh offense as a whole. So I'm going to be moving on to the quarterbacks, and a guy that I want to talk about first is a guy who's also on this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. And the guy that I'm talking about is James Conner. James Conner finished as the 7th running back in half-point PPR leagues last season. He was a guy that I was fortunate enough to pick up last season, helped me en route to winning a Super Bowl or a fantasy title in one of my leagues. So he's a guy that I definitely have a lot of respect for, because he really helped me put a little bit of money in my pockets. But he's a guy last year who finished in the top 12 in just about everything. He had 215 carries, which was 11th amongst running backs, 973 yards. So he didn't quite eclipse that 1,000-yard mark, and 13 total touchdowns last season. But he did a little bit of everything. He added a few things through the air. He had 55 receptions for 497 yards. So overall, to say the least, it was a very productive season for James Conner. In spite of not having Le'Veon Bell there, he really filled that spot in nicely. After, of course, he was a rookie last season. We really didn't know. He was also a guy who, I can't remember exactly, but I know he was, he had a little bit of, it might have been, don't quote me on this, but he might have had some form of cancer, something that was pretty rough for James Conner while he was in college. So it was a pretty awesome comeback story from last season, being able to provide for the football team like that and really go on to make a name for himself. But again, it's all boiling down with this offense being the question marks for me. Based on the numbers he was able to provide last season, he was absolutely solid. But Jalen Samuels is a guy that came on last season when James Conner went down with a little bit of an injury towards the end of the season. But Jalen Samuels really came on and showed that he can absolutely be a solid running back behind James Conner. And if, of course, James Conner doesn't show that he can continue to handle the workload, Jalen Samuels can be a guy that can kind of balance that out. He got off to a little bit of a slow start, Jalen Samuels did, in his first start for the Steelers, but followed up with 142 rushing yards and 19 carries against the Super Bowl winning Patriots. So it's just a situation where with that second string running back really breathing down his neck, it's hard to say that James Conner sees another 200 plus carry season. So that's just one of the question marks in my opinion. Maybe they start giving a little bit more responsibility to Jalen Samuels. And on top of that, they went out and drafted rookie Benny Snell, who is another guy in college who was a workhorse back and a guy who could potentially take some goal line carries away from James Conner this coming season. So again, guys, boils down for me in this offense, I've just got so many question marks. And if I had to say, if I'm going for anybody, it's maybe Dante Moncrief in the later rounds in this offense, just because he's going in those later rounds, those double-digit rounds, 12, 13, maybe even as early as the 11th round. But he's just got a little bit of upside there, especially if James Washington doesn't pan out. Then it's Juju and Dante Moncrief really having to carry the load of that wide receiving core. So if I'm having to go with anybody on this offense, it's going to be Dante Moncrief. James Conner, Ben Roethlisberger has a little bit of question marks kind of looming for me, and I just want the guy that gives me the most upside. So if I can get Dante Moncrief in the later rounds, I certainly will. But James Conner, just again, guys, we just don't know as of right now. He's got a very high ceiling. He can absolutely pop off another season similar to what he did this year. Statistically, the running backs in previous years for the Pittsburgh Steelers have provided absolute value numbers for your fantasy football teams. And I'm not talking about just Le'Veon Bell, but D'Angelo Williams back when Le'Veon Bell had a little bit of an injury. D'Angelo Williams was able to come in and provide for this football team. So James Conner can absolutely have a similar year, but in my opinion, I really think he takes a step back. Again, he finished as the number 7th. I think he finishes in the top 12, but I think he may fall out of the top 10. There's a few other guys that I like to come into the top 10 this year, which I'll, of course, go over in another video also. But I'll move on here, guys. I want to try and kind of make this video not so long, so that's why I'm kind of just turning these, throwing these at you, kind of not as quickly as I can, but just want to get my point across again, guys. All I want to do is just make you guys aware of the situations with these guys. Don't put all your chips in the pot and hope that this guy's going to be able to turn out for you the way that he did last year. And so again, that's just my biggest point that I want to get over to you guys. Moving on to the next guy. The next running back on my list is going to be James White, the running back for the New England Patriots. He finished as the 8th running back in PPR leagues last year. He had a pretty decent year. A lot of his numbers kind of came towards the beginning of the season. He was a little up and down towards the last half of the season, but he was a guy who had 94 carries, 425 yards rushing, and 5 rushing touchdowns. So he wasn't a guy that was really the most dominant, and also didn't see the most volume on the ground. And that's just a situation with these New England running backs, and I'll go into that here in just a second. But where James White really shined was in the passing game. He had 123 targets last season, which was 2nd in the NFL amongst running backs. 87 receptions, again 3rd amongst running backs. 751 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. So, that really goes without say that James White was able to provide really solid numbers. However, like I said, at the very beginning of the season, he was phenomenal. For the first few weeks. Going into the second half of the season, he was a little bit up and down. So it was hard to know what you were going to be getting out of James White in those last few years. But again, he finished as a number 8 running back last season, and I think he's going to see a little bit of a fall off this season. Back in 2016, he finished off the season as the 28th running back on the list. Going into 2017, he had a lot of the analysts, a lot of the consensus reports, things like that, stating that he can absolutely come in and be a dominant player for your fantasy football team. So people got really aggressive with him in 2017, and he ended up flopping, placing 40th amongst running backs in 2017. Now, I'm not saying that James White sees that type of a fall off this season. However, there's a huge committee in New England, and James White can be a value if you get him at the right time. Sure, will I add him to my team? Absolutely. I know he's going to get that. Just add a little bit more depth. Hopefully, by the time I'm even thinking about getting James White, I'm in a situation where I've got my solid running backs, my starting running backs, and if I draft James White, hopefully it's just for some depth. Maybe a guy that I can throw in at the flex position, things like that. But they have a huge committee going over there in New England. And that's really a situation that we know of New England just from as far back as we can think of. Sony Michel's still around. He's going to be healthy come the start of the season. And he's the number one on the depth chart. He's going to be the guy that gets a lot of the volume on the ground. Also a guy who can catch the ball a little bit, so might take away from some targets from James White. Of course, James White is right behind him as the RB2, but they actually went out and drafted Damian Harris, who, again, was another workhorse back in college. So he could be a guy that gives both Sony Michel and James White a little bit of a run for their money. They even kept Rex Burkhead in the picture for whatever reason. You would think with those three kind of lining out the depth chart for you at the running back position that maybe they wouldn't be in much need of Rex Burkhead, but Rex Burkhead is kind of that Swiss Army knife, good at running the ball, good at catching the ball. So it's just, you can't really trust the New England offense as far as your running backs go. They've got a few wide receivers that I'll absolutely be targeting like Julian Edelman and N'Keal Harry, towards the middle rounds of the draft. But James White, again, not a guy that I'm not going to be drafting, but hopefully he's going to be a guy that I'm picking up just to add depth at my running back position. But in my opinion, it's just going to be purely the committee interfering with anything that James White has potential of accomplishing this year. And he's very scheme dependent. He's either gonna blow out for you, or he's gonna kind of flop for you, and that's just a situation with James White. And we saw that again in the second half of the season last year. So just be cautious of it, guys. Don't be a guy who, just because James White's on the board and we saw what he did last season, that he's going to be a guy that he can be a solid RB2 for your team. Absolutely not. RB3 at the absolute earliest. RB4 makes me feel a whole lot better. Again, just to add depth to my running back position on my team. So I just think he takes a little bit of a step back. Too many interferences for me. Not really knowing what you're going to get on a week in and week out basis. So again, guys, just again boiling down to the question marks surrounding James White and the committee there. So not saying stay away from him. Just be cautious. Don't get too aggressive with him and everything. But moving on to my wide receivers, and this is one that might throw a few of you guys for a loop here, because I know a lot of guys are really high on him, and I'm a fan of him too. But the guy that I'm talking about is Tony Toe Tap, Antonio Brown. Finished the fourth wide receiver last season, but a big thing with that was the Steelers finished as the second passing offense in the NFL last year, and actually first in attempts. And I broke down Ben's numbers earlier, so I don't really want to go back over that. But Antonio Brown saw 169 targets last year, second in the NFL with that, 104 receptions, seventh in the NFL, and 1,297 receiving yards, and a booming 15 touchdowns. So he had a phenomenal season last year. And it was great. And again, it's just based on that volume that the Steelers offense, and you knew what you were getting when you were playing the Steelers. I'm not the biggest fan of the Steelers. While I watch them, absolutely, I watch pretty much in any football game that comes on TV. But if you're a fan of the NFL and it's things that you've seen in the past, you just kind of know that primarily the Steelers are a pass-first offense, and they have been for quite some time now. But again, that was pure volume for Antonio Brown. He saw a lot of situations where he was being forced the ball, double coverage, things like that, and Ben Roethlisberger was able to fit him into those windows, and Antonio Brown was able to make the catch. So he was overall just kind of in the perfect situation in Pittsburgh. I'm not exactly sure what all went down there. There's a lot of back and forth, he said, she said, type of BS going on over there. But He ended up moving on to the Oakland Raiders, and this is kind of where the question marks start to pop up with how will Antonio Brown be utilized this year. In my opinion, he's the only real threat there at the wide receiver position. They went ahead and traded for Tyrell Williams from the Los Angeles Chargers, so they added a little bit more depth at the wide receiver position, but he's the only real threat there for that offense. And again, I'm going to go back to what defenses in the NFL are going to do. I know the Patriots do it. They're kind of known for doing things like this, but it's always take away the main threat. They went out and got Josh Jacobs in the draft this year, and it's looking like he's probably going to be the starting running back for the Oakland Raiders. But in my opinion, Antonio Brown is going to be the guy that defenses need to stop, need to get in front of in order for them to have the best chance at winning. And overall, he went from an offense that placed second in passing attempts last season, or first in passing attempts last season, and a quarterback that finished in the top 3, to Derek Carr, who actually finished 17th behind, believe it or not, Eli Manning. So it doesn't paint a very good picture for me. I'm not going to be real aggressive with Antonio Brown. I've seen him sometimes even going in the first round, later part of the first round, early part of the second round. It's just a situation with me. Am I staying away? Probably not, because I know the skill set that he has, and I know the words that I'm looking for are, he's very dynamic. He's really one of the more prolific wide receivers in the league. So if I can get him in the later part of the second round, meaning you probably pick first in the first round, you're going to come all the way back around and get him in the later part of the second round, maybe the middle part of the second round, I would reach for him there. Just because based off of pure talent and the upside that he brings you. But is he going to see another top 4 performance like he did last season? Probably not. Is he going to see 169 targets? Probably not. It's just a situation where, again, coming from the Pittsburgh Steelers, he saw that volume. He had the quarterback there to throw him the ball. He had the quarterback that trusted him. And Ben Roethlisberger is a guy that fantasy owners trust. I know that they were really big on him last year. But he's fallen down in some draft boards this year, but just because of the questions surrounding him. But Derek Carr doesn't have that trust built up with any fantasy owners, and it's just a situation where, again, boiling down to the question marks surrounding this offense. Again, Antonio Brown's going to be the main threat there. What will defenses do to stop this offense? Probably going to be getting in front of Antonio Brown. He's going to be seeing a lot of double coverages. And I'm not saying that that's not situations that he hasn't overcome in the past, because he absolutely has. And that's just based off of Antonio Brown being a phenomenal athlete and a phenomenal wide receiver. But he has to build that chemistry with Derek Carr in order to see any type of top 10 performance, in my opinion. But again, the questions are, how will he be schemed in? And a big thing with Antonio Brown, and we saw it last season, is what if things don't work out? What if he doesn't see the passing attempts? What if he doesn't see the big plays down the field? What if he doesn't see the ball thrown to him in the big parts of the game? What's he going to do? Last year we saw him shut down, screaming, throwing tantrums on the sideline, things like that. So are those going to be things that we see again this season? Is he going to be a little bit more encouraging towards his teammates and his quarterback? Questions, guys, question marks. So again, Antonio Brown, I'm extremely confident in my prediction that he's going to be falling down on the list. Can he see a top 10 performance? It's likely, but I really wouldn't be surprised if we saw Antonio Brown actually fall outside of the top 10 this season. So another guy that I wanted to talk about, that I'm picking this guy, but only because, not to say that last season was a fluke, but to say that I don't think that his numbers get any better than what he put up last season. And the guy that I'm talking about is Adam Thielen from the Minnesota Vikings. Finished last season as the 7th wide receiver in PPR leagues. Saw 155 targets last year, 113 receptions for 1,373 yards and 9 touchdowns. But again, Minnesota is an offense last year. Now, I'm going to put emphasis on last year. That was the 6th in passing attempts with Kirk Cousins throwing him the ball. And Kirk Cousins really loved Adam Thielen. You could really tell Adam Thielen was more of his first choice. And then, of course, Stephon Diggs. But I feel like last season, again, was really as good as we're going to see from Adam Thielen. I really don't think that we're going to see any numbers be shooting up. Absolutely not in targets. And the reason that I say that is the reports coming out from reporters and things like that saying that Minnesota will be a little bit more of a balanced attack, trying to run the ball a little bit more. So I really don't think that we're going to see a situation next year from the Minnesota Vikings where we see 600 plus passing attempts. I think we're going to be a little bit more, not drastically down, but I think we're going to be somewhere around the mid to high 50s, somewhere around 550, 570. But even with that being said, I know it doesn't seem like that much, but you're talking about taking away 20 or 30 receptions from Adam Thielen, where last year he finished with 155. So with 130 targets, what type of numbers can he really put up with that? We may even see a season of right around 100, maybe even 100, under 100 receptions this coming season. So just a guy that we're going to really need to find out what this offense has in store for us. Are they going to be a little bit more of a balanced attack? Are they going to try to run the ball more? Are they going to be a team that spreads the ball out a little bit more and not targeting primarily, Adam Thielen? Is he going to, be more open to throwing the ball to Stephon Diggs? Kyle Rudolph was just signed to a contract that, extended him to stay with the team. So Dalvin Cook is back. He's also a guy that can see some targets out of the backfield. So it's really going to boil down to a situation where we're going to really need to see how this offense unfolds. But again, is Adam Thielen a guy that I'm going to be staying away from? Absolutely not. I will target Adam Thielen if I can get my hands on him at the right time, guys, at the right time. You always want to be drafting people at the right time that's going to bring you value. You don't want to be reaching in the early parts of the draft, and that's exactly where Adam Thielen is going. But I bring these guys up, both Antonio Brown and Adam Thielen, to really say this. So basically what I'm trying to say is I say all that to say this. Do I think Adam Thielen has a great season next year? Yes. Do I think he finishes in the top 10? Maybe. Will I be surprised if he falls outside of the top 10? No, I will not. Same type of situation with Antonio Brown. But there's just a few guys that I like that I think will be moving up the list. For example, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mike Evans, and I'll be going over players like that. I know I'm calling this one the step back, so I will be dropping another video in the future, kind of vice versa to this, people that I think will actually move up next season. So I'll just kind of give you a little bit of a sneak peek and let you know Juju Smith-Schuster and Mike Evans are guys that I'm going to be talking about in that next video, because I see them moving up in the rankings to finish off the season at the end of this 2019 season. So again, Antonio Brown, not a guy that I'm staying away from. Adam Thielen, again, not a guy that I'm staying away from. But just guys that I'm being cautious of, knowing that they're going to be taking a step back. I don't expect another number 7, wide receiver 7 performance from Adam Thielen, and I'm not expecting another wide receiver 4 performance from Antonio Brown either. So moving on, guys, what I really wanted to talk about here also, just to kind of wrap up the video, is I'm going to be finishing up with the tight end position and just a couple of guys briefly to kind of give you an idea of where I'm coming from here. Is George Kittle is going to be kind of my number 1 guy, and the reason for this being is people are really going all in with George Kittle this season. He's one of the big 3 tight ends going this season, but in my opinion, it's just really hit or miss with the tight end position. He had a phenomenal season last year. But again, it's boiling down. Again, I know I'm saying this repeatedly, but question marks, guys. George Kittle, again, the most dominant of the pass catchers on that offense, probably the most prolific weapon that they have on that team. I know they've got Dante Pettis, They added Deebo Samuel, so a couple of guys maybe to take some attention away from George Kittle, but they even have Jimmy Garoppolo coming back to throw him the football. So, but the biggest thing is of course, again, is he going to be able to see that type of volume again next season? Do you think they're going to be able to get him the ball that much next season like they did this year? He saw actually 135 targets last season. He was able to reel in 88 receptions for 1,377 yards. So it's just a situation where, just too many question marks looming for me. I do think he takes a little bit of a step back. In this offense, I don't think that we see another top 3 performance out of George Kittle this coming up season. Call me crazy, but it's just a situation where his draft capital is going to be a little bit too high for me to even think about getting that aggressive going after George Kittle. Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, I'm not too cautious of. I really think that both of those guys have a similar season to what we saw last year. However, George Kittle is a guy that I feel this year sees that step back. And again, guys, it's just based off of what would defenses do. We know defenses in the NFL are going to take away your most dangerous weapon. And right now we know George Kittle is that dangerous weapon. So that's one of the things that really leads me to believe George Kittle may not see the volume. He may not see the receiving yards that we saw last year. So I think his numbers will be a little bit more down this coming season. Do I hope he proves me wrong? No, not really. But do I want to wish anybody bad either? Absolutely not. But again, guys, if I can get my hands on him, sure. If he drops to the 5th round, 4th round, but I don't see it happening, sure, maybe just to have a guy with a lot of upside like George Kittle. But again, guys, I really think defenses are going to be locking down on him, being the best player on that offense. So again, that just leads me to believe that he will be seeing a little bit of a step back this season. So last guy on the list for me is going to be Eric Ebron. He was just a guy last year that he really had a great season. Andrew Luck, they really played on a prolific offense last season. So, but Eric Ebron is a guy to me. Jack Doyle's going to be coming back. Mo Allison Cox, I believe, is his name, as the third tight end there that could potentially take a little bit of volume away from Eric Ebron. But he saw 110 targets last year for 66 receptions, but only had 750 yards, and he was really the only healthy tight end last season. Now they've got Jack Doyle back, things like that. So it's just a situation where, again, I don't think Eric Ebron sees the volume that he saw last year. But it really goes without saying. It's a tight end position. Again, it's very hit or miss at this position. Let me see where he finished last season. Give me just 1 second. Eric Ebron finished as the 4th wide receiver last season. So it's just a situation where, again, I just don't think that he sees the volume that we were used to seeing last season. I don't think that he's going to be as dominant, especially with the depth chart being as in depth. They've got 2 solid tight ends. Moss and Cox can really come in and steal some targets from Eric Ebron. So it's just a situation where got a little bit of question marks surrounding him, and I believe, I think that there's a couple more tight ends out there that find their way up the list a little bit this coming season. So for that reason, I see Eric Ebron taking a little bit more of a step back, guys. So, but nonetheless, again, guys, these are guys that, again, not saying that I'm staying away from any of these guys. What I am saying is, do I expect performance from these guys like they put on last season? And I'm going with absolutely not. I really don't think that any of these guys see a similar season. I think they take a step back. And no, I'm not saying they fall off a cliff and Patrick Mahomes falls out of the top 10 of quarterbacks next season. Absolutely not. Same goes for Antonio Brown, Adam Thielen, James Conner, James White. I really don't think that these guys take too big of a fall. They just got too many question marks for me to believe that they're going to see a similar situation like they did last year. So with that being said, I'm not staying away from these guys. I like these guys. Going into this season, it's just I do not expect a season similar to what we saw in the previous year, guys. So, but nonetheless, guys, thank you so much for sticking around in the video. If you enjoy the content, I encourage you to like the video, subscribe to the channel. My goal is to post 2 to 3 videos a week. And leading up to the start of the season, and probably definitely 3 to 4 during the season. That's my goal. Don't take my word for it, but again, guys, thank y'all so much for coming by and showing support. Let me know down below if I missed anybody that you think might take a step back next season. I'd really like to hear from you guys. Leave me a little bit of feedback. Again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends and family. I'm here to help you out, help you win some money. This is The Catch. My name is Lawrence, aka Law. Thank you for watching. Peace.